For 14 years, the memory of Jenna Morales was a ghost that haunted the local dance community, a brilliant talent who vanished on a desert trail in 1984. The official story was a tragic accident, a young woman lost to the elements. But for Jenna's former partner, Mateo, now a guilt-ridden private detective, the case was a wound that never healed. His world is thrown into chaos when a call comes from the sheriff's department. A construction crew clearing an overgrown field miles from the trail has unearthed Jenna's distinctive silver ankle bracelet, and the rusted metal bears a chilling, impossible secret. A perfect impression of human teeth. This one clue would unravel a 14-year-old lie, exposing a darkness that had hidden in plain sight. Stick with me as we follow the trail of a forgotten promise and uncover the truth behind a dancer's final steps. The year was 1998. The phone call felt like a jolt of electricity to a heart that had been beating on low power for over a decade. Mateo sat in his small, cluttered office, the afternoon sun cutting dusty lines through the blinds. On his wall, surrounded by certificates and his private investigator's license, was a single-frame photograph that didn't belong. It was of two people on a stage, caught mid-lift, their faces a mix of intense focus and pure joy. He was younger then, and the woman in his arms, Jenna, seemed to float, impossibly light. He'd become a PI for one reason, and it wasn't to track down cheating spouses or find people who didn't want to be found. He did that to pay the bills. The real reason, the one that got him out of bed every morning, was the file in his bottom drawer. It was thin, filled with yellowed newspaper clippings and a faded photo of a smiling girl in a pink tracksuit, crouching to tie her shoe at the edge of a dusty trail. The official report said she got disoriented, that the Arizona sun was unforgiving. It said she probably succumbed to dehydration and the desert reclaimed her. Mateo had never believed it. Jenna knew that trail better than anyone. She was disciplined, prepared. She wasn't the type to get lost. The call was from a Detective Riley with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Department. His voice was young, professional, and held no trace of the history that weighed on Mateo. He spoke about a new housing development going up east of Scottsdale in an area that had been nothing but scrubland and mesquite trees since the state was founded. A bulldozer operator, clearing the land, had turned up something. An ankle bracelet, Riley said. Silver with a little sun charm. Records show it belonged to a Genevieve Morales. Mateo's breath caught in his throat. He remembered the day she bought it from a street vendor in Sedona. She'd said the little sun charm reminded her of their dance troupe, the Sonoran Sun. There's something else, Riley continued, his voice dropping slightly. There are indentations on it. The foreman thought it was from the bulldozer, but it looks organic. We'd like you to come down and confirm it's hers. Mateo drove to the station in a haze. The bracelet was there, lying in a sterile evidence bag on a cold metal table. It was tarnished and caked with dirt, but it was hers. And the marks, they weren't scratches. They were a distinct curved pattern of small scallops pressed into the soft silver. He didn't need a forensics expert to tell him what he was looking at. He'd seen that pattern 1,000 times. In smiles, in grimaces, in the mouths of every person he'd ever met. It was a bite mark. The official story of a tragic accident had just been shattered. Jenna hadn't just been lost to the elements. Someone had been with her. And in that moment, Mateo's 14-year-old mission was reborn. This was no longer about finding a body. It was about finding a killer. He urged Detective Riley to send the bracelet to a forensic odontologist at the state crime lab. While they waited for the results, Mateo went back to his office and pulled out the old boxes he hadn't opened in years. They were filled with playbills, photos, and contact sheets from the Sonoran Sundance troupe. He spread them across his desk, the smiling faces of 24 young, hopeful dancers staring back at him. One of them, he was now certain, was a murderer. The call from the lab came 3 days later. The odontologist was certain. The bite mark is human, she said, her voice clinical. Female, most likely, based on the size and arch, and there's a slight overlap on the top incisors. It's a distinctive malocclusion, a unique imperfection, a signature. The problem was a signature is useless without a name to attach it to. Without a suspect, they had no dental records to compare it against. For the police, it was confirmation of foul play, but it wasn't a lead. For Mateo, it was everything. He now knew he was looking for a woman with a slightly crooked smile. He stared at the old troop photos, his eyes scanning every laughing face, every open mouth. He made a list of the women in the company, trying to remember details that had long since faded. He decided to start with the people who had been closest to the center of their small world. His first visit was to Evelyn Reed. Back then, Evelyn had been the other principal female dancer, Jenna's understudy, and professionally, her biggest rival. Mateo found her married name Prescott and an address in a sprawling manicured subdivision in North Phoenix. The house was enormous, a beige palace with a 3-car garage and a perfectly green lawn that defied the desert climate. Evelyn herself opened the door. She was still beautiful, her dancer's posture intact, though her face was hardened by time and what looked like expensive cosmetic procedures. She feigned shock when Mateo introduced himself, her hand flying to her chest. She ushered him into a cavernous living room with white furniture and abstract art. She expressed horror and sadness as he told her about the bracelet. "Oh, that's just awful," she said, her voice a practiced whisper of sympathy. Poor Jenna. I always knew something terrible must have happened. She was so trusting, a little careless. She probably accepted a ride from a stranger or met someone on the trail. Mateo watched her carefully. She was already building a narrative, pointing the blame toward an unknown monster, a convenient phantom. He asked her about the dynamic within the troupe, about rivalries. "Oh, heavens no," she said with a dismissive laugh. "We were a family. Of course there was professional competition. Jenna was a brilliant dancer. I admired her more than anyone." There it was. A flicker of something in her eyes, a shadow that passed too quickly to be named. She then looked at him, her expression softening into something that felt strangely intimate. "She adored you, Mateo. Everyone knew it. It was sweet how much she looked up to you." The words were meant to sound kind, but they were carefully chosen. Looked up to you. Not loved you. She was subtly diminishing their connection, reframing it as a one-sided crush. Mateo left the interview with a growing unease. Evelyn's performance had been a little too perfect. His next stop was on the other side of town, in a small, run-down studio with cracked mirrors and worn wooden floors. It was run by their old choreographer, Antoine. He was older now, his hair gray and his movements slower, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. When Mateo told him about the bracelet, Antoine didn't cry. He just nodded slowly, a deep sadness settling over his features. "I never believed she just wandered off," he said, his voice raspy. "That girl had a spine of steel and a built-in compass." Mateo asked him about Evelyn. Antoine sighed and ran a hand over his face. Evelyn was a fantastic dancer, precise, technical, but she didn't have what Jenna had. Jenna had fire. When the two of you danced together, it was like watching a conversation. Everyone else in the room disappeared. He paused, looking Mateo directly in the eye. And Evelyn hated it. She hated Jenna for her talent, but what she really hated was that you saw it too. That girl was head over heels for you, Mateo, and she couldn't stand that you and Jenna had that connection. The words landed like a punch. He'd been so focused on dance, on his partnership with Jenna, that he'd been blind to the drama swirling around him. Antoine must have seen the confusion on his face. He walked over to a dusty filing cabinet and pulled out a large cardboard box. "Old memories," he said, placing it on the floor. "Programs, photos. Maybe something in here will help." That night, back in his office, Mateo sorted through the contents of the box. He found programs from their old shows, reviews from the local paper praising his and Jenna's partnership, and then he found a stack of candid photographs from a cast party in 1983, a year before Jenna disappeared. He flipped through them, a sad smile on his face. There was a photo of him and Jenna laughing over a shared joke. There was Antoine dramatically gesturing, and then he saw it. A photo of Evelyn. She was in the background talking to another dancer. She was laughing, her head thrown back, her mouth wide open in genuine, uninhibited joy. And her smile was crooked. Her two front teeth were not the perfectly straight veneers she had now. One of them clearly, distinctly, overlapped the other. Mateo's blood ran cold. He stared at the photograph, the image burning itself into his mind. The bite mark. The distinctive malocclusion. It wasn't just a crooked smile, it was a perfect match to the forensic odontologist's description. He suddenly remembered a conversation from years ago, sometime in late 1985. He'd run into Evelyn at a coffee shop. She'd smiled, and he'd noticed her teeth were different. "Finally had them fixed," she'd said brightly. "My parents gave me the money as a graduation present. Best thing I ever did." The timing was a chilling coincidence. A year after Jenna vanished, the evidence of her killer's identity was permanently erased from her own mouth. He finally had a suspect, but he had a huge problem. The physical proof was gone. Her current dental records would show a perfect smile, nothing like the crooked teeth that had left their mark on his partner's ankle bracelet. He needed to find the records of the woman she used to be. Mateo spent the next 2 days making phone calls, a frustrating search for a ghost in a paper-filled past. He started with the dental insurance the dance company had offered. It was a long shot, but the insurance company, after much persuasion, dug into their microfiche archives. They found a claim from Evelyn Reed in 1982. The claim was from a small, private dental practice in her family's old neighborhood. The dentist's name was Dr. Alistair Finch. A quick search showed that Dr. Finch had retired almost 5 years ago. Mateo found a listing for him in Sun City, a retirement community. He drove out there, his heart pounding with a mix of hope and desperation. He found Dr. Finch watering his rose bushes in front of a small, tidy home. The man was in his late 70s, but his eyes were still sharp. Mateo showed him his PI license and explained the situation, leaving out the more gruesome details. He just said he needed to verify a patient's dental records from the mid-'80s for a missing person case. Dr. Finch was hesitant, citing patient confidentiality. "This is about Jenna Morales," Mateo said, his voice cracking slightly. "I was her dance partner." The dentist's expression softened. He remembered the case. It had been all over the news. "Come inside," he said. His garage was filled with neatly labeled boxes of old patient files. It took them nearly an hour, but they finally found it. A thick manila folder with "Read Evelyn" typed on the tab. Inside were x-rays, charts, and, preserved in a small cardboard box, a plaster dental mold from 1983. Mateo stared at it. The upper teeth were a perfect, three-dimensional replica of the crooked smile from the photograph. The overlapping incisors were undeniable. This was the final piece. He thanked Dr. Finch, his hands trembling as he held the mold. He drove straight to the sheriff's department and laid it all out for Detective Riley. The bracelet, the photo, and the plaster cast of a killer's smile. Riley looked from the mold to the enlarged photo of the bite mark on the bracelet. It was a perfect match. That afternoon, they got the warrant. Mateo insisted on going with them. He needed to see her face when the lie finally crumbled. They pulled up to the beige palace, and this time, when Evelyn opened the door, her practiced smile faltered. Seeing Mateo standing behind 2 uniformed detectives, all the color drained from her face. They sat her down in her pristine white living room. Detective Riley calmly laid out the evidence. He placed the evidence bag with the bracelet on the glass coffee table, then the crime lab photos, and finally the plaster mold of her teenage teeth. Evelyn stared at the mold as if it were a venomous snake. The silence in the room was absolute. Her husband, a man with a self-important air, began to bluster about lawyers and harassment, but Evelyn held up a hand, silencing him. She just kept staring at the mold. 14 years of deception collapsed in an instant. Her shoulders slumped, and a sound escaped her lips, a dry, rattling sob. "I just wanted to talk to her," she whispered, the words tumbling out. "I was so jealous of her, of you, of everything. She had it all, and she didn't even have to try." She confessed everything. She had known Jenna was going for a hike that morning and followed her. She drove to a different point on the trail and cut across the desert to intercept her, wanting to confront her away from any possible witnesses. The argument started over dancing, over a solo that Jenna had been given. But it quickly turned to Mateo. Evelyn screamed at her, accusing her of flaunting her talent, of stealing Mateo's affection. Jenna, confused and frightened, tried to walk away. Evelyn grabbed her. They struggled. "I just pushed her," Evelyn cried, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. I didn't mean for it to be so hard. She fell backward. Her head, it hit a rock. There was so much blood. In a panic, she dragged Jenna's body away from the trail into a shallow wash and buried her under a pile of rocks and dirt. She saw the silver bracelet on Jenna's ankle, glinting in the sun. In a moment of pure, venomous rage, she ripped it off. "I don't know why I bit it," she said, her voice barely audible. "I was just so angry. At her. At everything." She kept the bracelet for years, a dark secret hidden in her jewelry box. Eventually, the fear that someone might find it became too much. She drove out to the undeveloped land and threw it as far as she could into the thick brush, thinking it would be lost forever. She never imagined that 14 years later, a city would grow over her secret. She gave the detectives the location of the shallow grave, drawing a crude map on a notepad. The aftermath was a quiet storm. The headlines were sensational, but for Mateo, the world had become strangely silent. They found Jenna's remains exactly where Evelyn had said they would be. Mateo was there when they did. A month later, there was a memorial service. All the old dancers from the Sonoran Sun came, their faces etched with age and sorrow. Mateo stood at the back, watching. He finally had the answers he had dedicated his life to finding. He had brought justice for Jenna, but as he stood there, he realized that justice and peace were two very different things. The guilt he carried was gone, replaced by a profound and empty sadness. After the service, he drove to the cemetery. He stood before the new, simple headstone that read, "Genevieve Morales, dancer, friend." Finally at rest. He placed a single white lily on the grass. The ghost was gone. The 14-year wound had finally closed, leaving a scar he would carry forever. He had kept his promise to his partner, and now, at long last, she could rest. And maybe, so could he. Evelyn's confession revealed that her actions were driven by years of resentment and jealousy. It makes you wonder, if someone had noticed the depth of her obsession earlier, could this tragedy have been avoided? Let me know what you think in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing and turning on notifications. We explore cases like this every week, seeking the truth for those who can no longer speak for themselves. Thank you for listening.